Bennelson, Interim Assistant Director, Wichita Public Works. Wanted to give an update on our winter storm response. This is not a normal winter storm for us. I think instead of having Kansas weather like we're used to, we're having Arctic weather here in Kansas, and we'll have that for the foreseeable future. So this storm's going to present some unique challenges, I think, that we aren't used to dealing with. But we're doing our best to keep up with road conditions. The reason I say that is that we were, I think, about 55 hours now of having temperatures below freezing. About 3 a.m. is the last time we were above 32 degrees. National Weather Service does not forecast us to go above freezing. In fact, I don't think we're forecast to go above 20 or 22 degrees over the next 7 days. There is not any, or at least anything resembling sunny weather that's forecast in there as well. A lot of times we sometimes count on sunlight being able to help us melt any residual winter precipitation, but it is forecasted to be either overcast or mostly cloudy through the duration of the next week and potentially week and a half. So this is weather that may be unprecedented, at least near in recent history here in Wichita. This is the third day also in a row where we've received some level of winter precipitation. Had some, I believe, an inch of snow that fell on Saturday, had a little bit of freezing rain and snow yesterday, and we have some ongoing flurries right now along with some freezing rain that we experienced earlier this morning. So our crews were put on standby at midnight on Saturday. They were activated in advance of the snow that hit Saturday morning. They began treating all of the main arterials, the 1,500 lane miles of primary north-south streets, and they've also done the school routes and secondary routes as well. Once we got on top of the weather and got road conditions mostly cleared up on Saturday, we again had our crews on standby Sunday. And when precipitation looked like it was going to start falling, we called everybody back in and activated our full response at about 7 a.m. Sunday. They've been working continuously since that time, continue to do so. On 12-hour shifts that rotate on and off. So we'll have our full contingent of 60 trucks like we have deployed now through the duration of any road conditions that continue to call for road treatments. A couple of things that we're doing in particular because of the very low temperatures and the lack of sunshine, normal road salt, a sodium chloride mix, becomes less effective as temperatures drop down to, say, 15 degrees and 10 degrees. So we supplement that with calcium chloride salt. The calcium chloride has a lower melting temperature, so it's more effective at these lower temperatures. We began supplementing our normal road salt with calcium chloride earlier this weekend, and we're now doubling the rate at which we put the calcium chloride in, so we have a heavier dose of calcium chloride than we normally have beginning this morning, and we'll continue with that heavier mix. We also increased the application rate of our 50% salt, 50% sand mix yesterday, and that was to get more material on the roadways. So the higher levels of calcium chloride should somewhat help our ability to melt the snow. And the sand, of course, particularly in these kinds of storms where there can be some long duration precipitation and snow or ice, provides traction to drivers. So that's going to be particularly important for us to keep sand on the roadways. Going forward, we'll continue to monitor conditions and continue to have our trucks providing salt and sand on the streets. And note of caution again, the city does this north-south, treats the north-south arterial streets and then school and secondary streets as well leading up to schools. We do not maintain or treat, I should say, neighborhood streets, the residential streets in front of most people's homes. And because the temperature and the lack of sunshine and this periodic wintry precipitation that we're getting, it's likely that parts of Wichita, particularly in the neighborhoods, are going to have some small amount of snow or ice that remains on the roadways for the next week and a half or so. And they'll periodically see that build up, maybe even on the main arterials, particularly in turn lanes or in the center lanes, for example, of streets. So we do ask for people's patience. This isn't to normal weather that people deal with here in Wichita, but we're doing our best to keep on top of it. And as normal, we would ask people to follow safe driving practices when they're in inclement weather. Particularly, one thing I think that's more specific to this kind of weather, anybody who's been driving today has probably noticed, in particular this morning, it's difficult to keep ice from forming on windshields. Even when you're driving, it seems to immediately hit the windshield, and within a minute it's already frozen up and freezing up, so that's obviously a challenge. So to try to drive safely, and certainly make sure that people have their all their windows scraped off before they get on the roadways. That, I'll answer any questions.
You mentioned this is unprecedented. Do you recall last time that we had these low temperatures and icy conditions?
I do not. So I am not a weather historian or a meteorologist. I do have daily weather data that goes back to 1954, which is when the airport terminal was built out there and when the weather station moved there. And I looked before I came down here, and I don't see any period of time from 1954 onward where we've had 8 or 9 days in a row of sub-freezing temperatures. So I don't know the last time it's been like this. Obviously, you go long enough in history and we'd find it. There might be some period before that time, or maybe even since that time that I missed, but I can't recall a time when it's been this cold for this long, potentially. But so it's not something we've normally dealt with. We've had it in the past where we've had 4 or 5 days in a row of sub-freezing temperatures, but not this duration, no.
How much more difficult does that make it to treat the roads when it's so cold?
It makes it much more challenging because the salt does not perform as effectively. And particularly, people would see the effects of it more in the mornings because overnight, the other thing too is salt becomes also a little bit more effective when people are driving on it and it's kind of pushing it around and mechanically moving any salt or any of the winter precipitation, any of the ice pack or snowpack kind of breaks it up along with the salt. So overnight, very few people are driving, so the road, for the most part, undisturbed, and then the temperatures are lowest at that time too, obviously, and in some cases in the next several days it could be as low as like 0 degrees or below freezing or below zero. So it becomes a lot more difficult to get the roads treated, but in particular in advance of morning commutes.
We already have quite a bit of moisture this winter. How's the salt and sand stockpile?
Salt sand supplies are very good right now. We have 3 salt domes, one at each of our operating facilities. Those are about half full right now. We have another 25% full load coming into each of those. So we'll be at about 75% capacity at our primary sites, but we also have 2 salt storage reserves that are far bigger than the salt dome. So we're converting some of that into the active mix and deploying it. So we have no concerns about material availability. We also have a reserve of this calcium chloride supplement as well. So we have more salt than we will need for this storm, and that's very helpful because we're not having to worry about getting resupply. We're basically just converting what's in our salt storage reserve into active supply and getting it to the trucks.
You talked about having trucks going 12-hour shifts, essentially constantly. When you have this cold, you have this precipitation. How much do you have to send trucks over the same stretch of land over and over again to kind of keep it going? Because you're fighting an uphill battle with this falling constantly.
It's a great question. When we don't have to put plows down, which we don't need to plow any of this, there's nothing on the roadway to plow, we're usually able to make it through the entire street network in about 8 hours, sometimes 8 to 10 effectively. So I would say we can usually get through the entirety of the city street network that we treat 2 to 2.5 times in a given day. So you're right, we end up just sending the same trucks over and they make a second pass and a third pass until the road conditions are to the point where we can maybe pull back and just do spot treatments in certain areas. And I'll say that too, a lot of times as the precipitation is falling, they're just everywhere with the salt and sand. And then as conditions start to clear up and there's only just patches here and there, they'll be a little bit more targeted in what they treat, but they're still going over the same streets that they went through, say, 8 or 10 hours before.
Are these conditions affecting the services of the city, or everything is still open?
Everything's still normal in terms of the services of the city. Obviously, like when we have people outside doing water main breaks or whatever else it is, I mean, we're certainly trying to get them, enough breaks that they aren't getting so cold that it's dangerous. We'll keep trucks running, for example. I know that wastes a little bit of fuel in a way, but on the other hand, it's nice to have a warm bed of a truck to go be able to sit in and warm up when it's going to be, -5 degrees or 10 degree below wind chill. And so we're taking some extra precautions there, but it's not impacting service levels of the city.
We talked about it a little bit, but just to reiterate, the most dangerous roads people should be paying attention to is probably their neighborhood roads right now, because everything else, they always need to be careful on the main streets, but those neighborhood roads, they aren't being treated. Those are the ones that are going to have build up over 5, 6, 7 days apart, right?
Yes, the neighborhood streets will have the most ice and snow buildup, but it's a trade-off because there isn't nearly the traffic volume or the speed traveled that you see on the other roads. So I'd say neighborhood streets obviously will be a concern for some, and then normal trouble spots. Certainly, people should be aware of when they're approaching intersections because of stopping and starting can obviously get people to skid out. So the intersections, curves, hills, elevated roadways like bridges, those usually are the first to freeze up as well. So certainly caution is everywhere. Okay, thank you all.